What's up YouTube? KS Gun Guy here. Thanks for joining me today as always. If you like what you see here, do be sure to like, subscribe, and share, and there's plenty more content on the way. So I recently did a video asking the question, what size firearm do you carry? And I got quite a few different answers. I appreciate all of you guys taking part in that. It's been a lot of fun to kind of gather some of that data. And within that data, there were several segments of firearms, size anyway, that people more often carry than not, one being compact and the other being single stack. Now, there were some subcompacts mixed in as well as some full-size firearms, but by and large, the single stacks and the compacts did kind of win out, at least so far. Check out that video if you haven't yet and leave a comment there as well. From a single stack perspective, though, there were several firearms that were mentioned multiple times, and I've got both of those firearms in front of us today. I've got the Kahr S9 and the Walther PPS M2. Now, the Kahr S9 is a new model. However, its predecessors, the CM line, CW line, CT line, and even the PM9, P3, 380, what have you, carry on some of these same features by and large. So we're going to take a look at both of these firearms and kind of compare and contrast. And this is not an if I could only have one video. This is just a quick comparison because if you're out there looking for single stack firearms, there are a lot of really good options out there, including both from Walther and from Kahr as well. So we'll take a look just kind of at the overall size characteristics of these here for just a moment or two. And the Walther PPS is going to be just a little bit longer. It's actually 0.4 inches longer than the Kahr is. But then from a height standpoint, the PPS M2 standing at 4.4 inches versus the 4.5 inches of the Kahr. Now that's 1/10 of an inch difference. But with that magazine right there in the Kahr, it does make that just a little bit longer as well. Now, one thing about the Kahr, when we talk about the height of it, one thing that's unique with the Kahr, you can actually get a pretty full grip on it. Now, even without the magazine, you can really get 2.5, almost 3 fingers on this grip right here, versus the PPS M2. It really is a 2-finger grip if we're looking at the flat base 6-round magazine in it. Now, from a width standpoint, here's another slight difference. The Kahr is going to be 0.9 inches wide versus the 1 inch on the PPS. Now we're splitting hairs at this point in time when we talk about concealability. I think both of these guns are very comfortable, but the Kahr does sit just a little bit more narrow. Now, another difference in stats, at least with these two firearms, is going to be the weight. The weight on the Kahr, unloaded with a magazine, is 17.1 ounces, so it's incredibly light, versus the 21.1 ounces with an unloaded magazine in the PPS. Now, that's 4 ounces difference, so you could look at it a couple of different ways. You could look at it from a comfort standpoint and carry. The Kahr might be a little bit more comfortable to carry all day long because it hardly weighs anything. However, from a shootability standpoint, an argument could be made, and your mileage may vary, where a slightly heavier firearm is going to absorb a little bit more recoil and have a little bit less, perhaps, muzzle flip on it, so it might be a slightly more shootable gun. Really just kind of, again, depends on your point of view there. Now we're going to talk about the triggers here in just a moment or two, and that is another place where these guns are radically different. From a feature standpoint, in terms of the grips, now both of these guns have reasonably decent ergonomics, although I'll say that they do them a little bit differently. The Kahr is going to have more of a flat style grip on it, and the texture on the grip, both the side straps and the back straps, to me are very mild. This is one of the few guns that I've reviewed that I think really could use some sort of grip tape or Talon grip, something like that. Although it's not absolutely necessary, at least you can get 2.5, almost 3 fingers on it. But I think it's just a little bit slick. Now, the Walther PPS, it carries forward the same kind of HK and Walther little squigglies or banana style grip, but it also does have some finger grooves and just a little bit more sculpting, so to speak, in the grip. So as far as I'm concerned, or at least for my hand, for whatever reason, this is not only very comfortable, but it doesn't seem to move out of my hand at all when I'm shooting. Again, I attribute part of that not only to the grip, but also a little bit to the weight as well. From a slide perspective, both of these do have front and back serration, so you can do your press checks and run your slide. One thing about the Kahr to note, to load around in the chamber, you do need to have it locked back, and you do need to use this as a slide release to make sure or ensure that the round fully seats in there and gets into the extractor properly. That is something that Kahr has carried forward. Versus the PPS M2, you can pretty much run it the way you want to, rack the slide, overhand, what have you. So just some differences there. There is an accessory rail on the Kahr, which the PPS does not have. So if you like lights, lasers, grenade launchers, that sort of thing, you can mount those accessories on the Kahr. Now, from a sights perspective, both of these guns do it reasonably the same. They both do have a 3-dot setup. However, on the Kahr, it's going to be a 3-dot polymer setup, although just fine. I mean, they definitely work, and there's some aftermarket support, so you could certainly change out those sights if you wanted to. The PPS M2, this is the LE edition. This does have the glowy sights or phosphorescent sights, so they do gather a little bit of light and glow for a certain amount of time, which is all fine and good and fantastic at the range, but from a concealed carry standpoint, perhaps those don't do a whole lot of good because you're probably going to be under clothing and all that sort of thing, so they're not gathering light. But either way, both have decent sights. Now the PPS does have this steel sights there, so a little bit of an advantage from that standpoint. Now, from a trigger perspective, here's where things definitely are very different, and it can depend on what type of shooter you are, what type of guns that you're used to, perhaps. So the Kahr does things just a little bit differently. Although it is a striker-fired firearm, it actually is a double-action trigger, and what I mean by that is it's going to be a heavier trigger pull throughout the trigger, and there's really no staging or stacking, at least that I've found in this particular trigger, but it's definitely going to be firm. Now, it's going to be very smooth all the way through. And once you get to your break, it's a nice audible tactile break, which is great. Now, one thing about this reset, and this could be true with a lot of different double action type firearms or revolvers, the reset is all the way out at the front of the trigger. So there really is no reset advantage, so to speak, with the Kahr. Not saying that that's necessarily bad, but if you're looking for a really short reset on a firearm, the Kahr might not be the way to go. And also being used to this long double action pull every single time you fire the gun, once again, might be something to consider and may need to spend some time with this gun. I know a lot of people are really big fans of this trigger, and that's great. It really is a very smooth trigger. For me, I find it a little bit more challenging to shoot simply because I'm used to more this standard striker fire with the standard reset, all of that. So I tend to sort of overanalyze this particular trigger, and I tend to shoot down because I'm anticipating the gun going off prior to it actually going off. So there's your trigger on the Kahr S9. Now the PPS M2 is going to be more of a standard striker fire trigger with the safety dingus in the middle. And when you pull the trigger, there's a little bit of resistance there. And of course, it does have a little tab right here, kind of a cocking tab, so to speak. But this trigger is going to be reasonably smooth. And once you get through your pull, you do have a defined wall. And then you have a break. It's a very nice break. It's reasonably clean, especially for a small firearm like this. And then you do have a reset, although it is not very tactile, it's not very audible, or at least in my opinion. I'll do this one more time. Go ahead and pull the trigger, and this time I'll keep quiet. Okay, there's your reset, and then back out to the start. So not necessarily the best reset on the market. I think things like Glock 19s have better resets, or sorry, Glock 43s rather, have better resets, far more predictable. Although I will say that the trigger on the PPS M2, from a carry standpoint out of the box, I think it does just fine. Now the Kahr is a fine trigger. I'm not very fond of it, and that's personal opinion, simply because it's that double action pull, and I prefer the striker fire type of trigger here. So from an overall standpoint, both of these are great guns and they're great offerings. They do things just a little bit differently, not only from an ergonomic standpoint, from a size standpoint, but then also from a trigger standpoint. So if you're looking at some different options, whether it's these two or even the Glock 43 Shield 9mm, or even something like maybe a 6-hour 938, something like that, you'll definitely want to take the time and, if you can, sample several different guns and perhaps even try shooting them at the range just to see which guns feel better and you shoot better as well, because all of these things, including the weight and ergonomics and all that, they definitely can make quite a bit of difference there. So I'm interested to hear what you have to say about these two firearms. Be sure to leave a comment below. I'm excited to read those. Thanks once again for joining me. Really appreciate it, and I will see you next time. Thanks.